Okay, so what if I told you that the most advanced AI on the planet, the thing that powers large language models, isn't new at all? I mean, what if its core design was figured out billions of years ago, not in a computer lab, but inside every living cell?
Right, let's just get straight into this, because it's a huge claim. The argument we're digging into today isn't some cute analogy. We're not talking poetry here. The idea is that the actual structural information architecture of a biological cell is the same as an AI transformer.
It sounds completely nuts, right? I mean, how can a bunch of wet, squishy chemistry inside a cell possibly be running the same playbook as a supercomputer crunching matrix math? Well, that's the mystery we're going to solve. To even begin to understand this, you have to throw out what you think a transformer is for. It's not really about language. That's just the surface.
Look, we see these things as language machines, but that's just the application. The real, fundamental problem that both AI and biology had to solve was this. How do you make the right move when the world is only giving you confusing, incomplete, and noisy signals? A cell's job is to react and survive, not to understand the universe. And honestly, that's exactly what an LLM is doing.
So if you strip a transformer down to its studs, it's really just an engine that does 5 things. First, it takes in little bits of info. Second, it translates those bits into its own internal language. Third, it figures out how all those bits relate to each other. Fourth, it decides which signals actually matter and cranks up their volume. And finally, it spits out a coordinated action. Now, I want you to burn that 5-step process into your brain because you're about to see it show up somewhere pretty unexpected.
All right, let's do a proper side-by-side breakdown. We're going to see how this whole thing builds, comparing the core parts of each system. And we'll start right at the beginning. What comes in?
An LLM eats tokens, basically words. A cell eats ligands, things like hormones. Now here's the absolute key. In both systems, these inputs mean nothing on their own. The word bank is useless until you know if we're talking about a river or money. A hormone is just a floating molecule until you know the state of the cell it bumps into. Both systems figured out that context is everything.
So how do they figure out that context? Well, an LLM uses something called embeddings. It's a fancy way of saying it turns a word into a point on a huge complex map that defines all its relationships. A cell uses receptors. Now, a receptor doesn't read a hormone. It's more like a lock. When the right key, the hormone, fits, it doesn't just open a door, it physically changes the shape of the cell's internal machinery, biasing it to do one thing over another. It's the exact same move, just biology's version of it.
And this gets us to the absolute magic ingredient, attention. In both AI and biology, attention isn't some little spotlight operator deciding what to look at. No, it's way cooler than that. It's the result of a massive competition. All the signals are fighting for influence, and attention is just the name we give to the winners. It's the system's way of asking, okay, with everything going on right now, what's the most important thing to listen to?
You know, we can even translate the super technical AI jargon of query key value directly into biology. The query is just the cell asking, what's my status right now? The key is the incoming signal. And the question is, how well does this key fit my current lock? And the value? That's the action the cell takes if the key is a good enough fit. It's the same logic, one-to-one.
And since both of these systems are trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane, they both needed a megaphone. They have to amplify the signals that matter. AI does this by passing the signal through layer after layer, making it stronger each time. A cell uses something called a protein kinase cascade, which is basically a biological domino rally. One molecule tips over the next, which tips over 100 more, turning a tiny initial signal into a massive response. This isn't a coincidence. It's a law of nature. Any system like this has to invent amplification to survive.
Okay, so the basic parts match up. But now we're going to go deeper down the rabbit hole. And this is where the parallels start to get a little bit unsettling.
Think about memory. When you're chatting with an LLM, that's called inference. The model isn't changing its core programming, it's just running it. That's exactly like a cell's day-to-day signaling. It doesn't rewrite its DNA every second. But training an LLM? That's the slow, incredibly expensive brain surgery where you actually change its fundamental weights. And that is the perfect analog for a cell changing its gene expression, a slow, risky, fundamental change to its core identity.
So what about when it all goes wrong? An AI hallucination is what happens when one internal signal gets way too amplified and the model starts believing in a false reality. The biological equivalent? Cancer. Or an autoimmune disease.
It's the exact same error. A signal gets amplified out of control and the system starts attacking itself or growing forever based on a lie.
And all of this leads to a really profound idea about what intelligence even is. It's not just about getting the right answer. It's about staying on this razor's edge, being sensitive enough to respond to the world, but stable enough not to fly off the handle and destroy yourself. That balancing act is the intelligence.
Okay, so let's bring it all home. Because if we accept these parallels, it totally changes how we define a cell, an LLM, and maybe even intelligence itself.
So in this light, a cell is not just a bag of chemicals. It is a living, breathing inference engine. It's constantly sampling the world, updating its internal odds, and then making the move that's most likely to keep it alive. It navigates reality perfectly without ever needing to know it like we do.
And what's an LLM? Well, it's the same engine, just disembodied. It's been ripped out of a body and its survival instinct has been switched off. It samples language instead of the environment, and its goal isn't self-preservation, it's just semantic preservation. Its only goal is to say the next thing that makes the most sense.
So, when you put it all together, you arrive at this one, final, mind-blowing conclusion. The first transformer, it wasn't trained on the internet.
It was trained on the brutal, unforgiving, winner-take-all dataset of natural selection. Its one and only job wasn't to be helpful or to write a poem. Its job was just to continue.
And that original model, the very first transformer, has been learning, updating, and optimizing itself nonstop for 4 billion years. The technology we think is so revolutionary is just the newest version of the oldest trick in the book.